have people making six-figure salaries used to be considered rich. Now households earning nearly $200,000 a year aren't even considered upper class in some US states. A six-figure salary used to be considered wealthy, but now most of these earners are struggling to stay afloat amid ravaging living costs and salary deflation. That's because households making $100,000 annually are still considered middle class in every US state, according to a recent analysis of 2023 US Census Bureau data. How much money you need to make to be rolling in it has changed. Earning nearly $200,000 a year isn't even considered upper class in some US states. Being considered rich is becoming more gate-capped among the 1%, raking in millions every day. According to a recent smart asset analysis of 2023 US Census Bureau data, a household making $199,000 a year in Massachusetts and New Jersey would still be considered middle class. Even in Mississippi, which has the lowest median middle-class income in the US, households would need to earn over $108,000 to be considered well off. The salary range of middle-class homes, representing about 52% of American workers, is of course huge. The lowest salary considered to be in the socioeconomic class is $36,132 in one state, while the highest hits a staggering $199,716 in another. But in every single state in America, a $100,000 salary is no longer enough to be considered upper class. And families with six-figure incomes are even struggling to get by.
What the hell is this spicy cat raid?
Corosix Blade, thank you for the raid. Welcome, Raiders! Welcome, Raiders! The aristocracy returns. The slave class is being solidified. A six-figure salary used to rouse images of high-class lifestyle, luxury cars, sizable houses, and a stacked savings account on the side. But now it's barely enough for most to survive. And this is also tying into where I said the depressing reality of looking in New England, an average middle-class home, something that was in Married with Children or in The Simpsons or in Family Guy, those are million-dollar homes in New England now. Those are million-dollar homes in many places in Massachusetts, in New Hampshire, in Connecticut, in Rhode Island. These places are absolutely fucked. It's insane. And it feels bad to be right about it, but it also feels good that it's being printed by people who probably also know much more than I do. More than half of Americans making over $100,000 annually lived paycheck to paycheck in 2022, 7% more than the previous year, according to a 2023 report from Payments and Lending Club. Isn't that insane to think about? Making $100,000 a year and living paycheck to paycheck. That is an insane figure to think of. There are a few reasons why more six-figure earners are struggling to keep their heads above water. The Smart Asset Reports points to raging inflation and shifting salaries across the US. Some workers have been hit with wage deflation. Employees who stayed in their current roles received a 4.6% wage bump in January and February, while those who switched jobs received only a marginally higher increase of 4.8%, according to recent data from the Atlanta Fed. This had ruined the prospect of switching companies to make more money in the same role. Inflation has also increased living expenses across the board, from egg prices shooting up over 60% in the last year. They don't mention that this is from mass genocide of chickens. There was a massive bird flu scare, and so they just killed hundreds of thousands of chickens. To a housing market paralyzed by soaring costs. It's assumed that a middle-class lifestyle could at least keep up with the basics, but 65% of those households say their incomes were falling behind the cost of living, according to a 2024 survey from financial services company Primerica. The American dream of a white picket fence and stocked fridge can no longer be achieved by solely raking in a six-figure salary. While the U.S. households could reach the upper class in states with a lower wage threshold, higher-paying job opportunities in those areas can be scant. And across the board, the average middle-class household in every state still doesn't make $100,000. There's no such thing as middle class in Massachusetts, say Boston.com readers. The current cost in Massachusetts is outrageous. Our family that makes over $250K a year doesn't feel middle class. And he's correct. He's correct. If I'm here showing you guys that typical middle class houses are getting close to, if not over $1 million in Massachusetts, this guy making $250K a year is going to spend a very good chunk of his income on just his mortgage. So, like, I do not blame these people for not being able to even feel middle class in this state. A lot of Boston.com readers seem to be in agreement that one thing concerning the middle class in Massachusetts, there's no such thing. There are only two classes in the US, oligarchy and the 99%, wrote Rybert of Dedham. Tony from Carlisle offered more specifics. If you can live on your savings and investments without selling your labor, you are upper class. If not, you're working class. The middle class is a fiction created to divide the working class against itself. And then there's Leanne from Malden who said, there's now the homeless, the poor, the working poor, the rich, and the ultra wealthy. And unless you're in one of those last two groups, you're probably depressed right now. They were responding to the recent news that, according to a new study by financial technology company SmartAsset, Massachusetts is now the most expensive state in the country for middle-class living. That's crazy, because everybody thinks to like New York and California when they think about astronomically high-priced states. The fact that Massachusetts has outpaced both of those is insane to me. Specifically, you need to have a household income between $66,565 and $199,716 to be considered middle class here, the study found. This $66,000 figure, I would be willing to bet you, is like far west south of Springfield or far north touching the Vermont border. Those are like the only places I could think of where that salary is going to be able to get you really anywhere in that state. Stop voting for Democrats. This is another thing that blows my mind, right? Like, I've been talking about Michelle Wu in Boston and how she's basically ignoring the federal government. She's doubling, tripling down on wanting to protect illegal immigrants, wanting to give them information on how they can stay in the country and get around the federal government, wanting to like turn Boston into a transgender sanctuary city, whatever the fuck that means. How are people still voting for this? How are there enough people that see everything crumbling around them and saying, yes, more of this. This is what I want. This is the right thing to do. Like, it's actively committing suicide, essentially. Like, you're not gonna be able to afford to live there. You're not gonna be able to afford to live in a crime-free area if you're importing illegal immigrants that you don't know who the fuck these people are. Is that amount of money referring to the cost of a single person household? Yes. That is referring to the cost of like single person household. Voting, definitely voting for it. If people like that aren't just on Reddit, unfortunately. It's like, I know some of those people exist in real life, but it's like, how are there that many in such a concentrated area? That's fine for them. They can simply move. Of the more than 200 readers who responded to our poll, the majority, 65%, said they felt middle class. But of the ones that offered their salary information, 34% within the study's range said they felt middle class, but another 34% who made more than the top number said that they too only felt middle class. Despite income surpassing $200,000 a year, upper class was still way out of reach. So here's the chart. Do you consider yourself middle class? 65% said yes. Looks like 153 people. No, I don't make enough, which is 23%, 54 people. No, I make too much, 12%, 27 people. What is your household income? 19 people said 66,565 or under that number. 101 people said between 66,565 and 199,716. And 109 people said more than $199,000. That is a pretty crazy amount of people. A lot of people forget to consider property taxes too. As the housing bubble grows, so do the property taxes. Yeah. These people paying these property taxes in Massachusetts as their house becomes more and more inflated, I don't know how they're affording that if they're on like 66,000 or under incomes, right? Because like some of these properties that I've looked at, because of how high the property taxes are, you're spending like $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 a year on property taxes. And if you're only making $66.5K a year, that is a huge chunk of your money just to the property taxes. People don't want to be considered one of the poor, so it's a lot likely exaggerated. I mean, it's possible, but it's still like an interesting chart. Don't think you're getting your tax assessed every year. You don't get it assessed every year. I'm not sure exactly how often tax assessments happen, but it's going to eventually come and assess your house, right? At almost twice the higher end income, Massachusetts is slowly becoming unaffordable for my family of 5, said Casey of Raynham. Property taxes, excise, insurance, premiums on healthcare, energy, staples like food and rent are increasingly getting higher with less value in return. Again, I even looked at like renting places in New England. The typical rent is about $3,000 a month. You can find places at around $2,100 or $2,400, but those are very rundown, very dangerous areas to be in. Coupled with higher tuition fees, the promise of even more taxes to come, being middle class in Massachusetts means being the most exploited and least appreciated taxpayer. Being able to eat in a restaurant, travel, go to a bar, said Ralph E. of Melrose, you cannot do it with less than $200,000 if you have a wife and kids. When you go out to eat in current year, right, I know how bad inflation's gotten. When I think about going to a restaurant, my brain is still stuck in the a night out at an average restaurant for 2 people, that's gonna be like $30. Right, that's gonna be like $25, $30 with like maybe, like a $5 to $8 tip. And then you go out and you have a meal at a restaurant and it's like $70 to $90 with like a $20 to $25 tip. And it's like, how did it go this far this quickly where my brain is still thinking about a night out at a restaurant being so cheap when in actuality, you're spending like damn near 100 plus on just one night out for 2 people. Like years ago, I remember on stream in like 2020 talking about going to like fucking the Melting Pot. The Melting Pot is what I would consider a nice restaurant. It's not like a 4 or a 5 star. There's no dress code. You don't need to dress up, but it's a date night restaurant. It's nicer than something like Olive Garden or Applebee's or Cheesecake Factory, right? Like it's a higher tier above that. And to go for a date night at Cheesecake Factory was $120. And I'd be like, it's a really great restaurant. It's a little expensive, but you do get a 5-course meal and it's an experience, right? Like, it's worth that $120. Now, you're spending close to that, not even for a 5-course meal experience at something like the Melting Pot. That's just your average night at like a normal restaurant. At like a Cheesecake Factory type restaurant. Like it's gotten insane. I couldn't imagine trying to go out to eat with like multiple children and a spouse. That's gonna be like a $200+ affair. That is insane. Cheesecake Factory is top. I'm not saying like they're bad restaurants. I'm just saying like when you go to a place, you think of them as like, oh, an Apple Bapples or a TGI Fridays or something is like just like a regular restaurant. I don't know how to phrase it, but I hope people get what I'm saying. Like it's a tier above fast food, but it's a tier below something like fucking Fire and Ice or Smith and Walensky's. I would put as like a really nice restaurant because I think they have a minor dress code. Something like Michael's I would put above that. Something like the Melting Pot I would put above like an Applebee's, right? Like I don't know how to say this, but I hope people understand what I'm saying. It's a nice restaurant, no Michelin star, above a chain. Yeah. It's a t-shirt restaurant you don't dress up for. Yeah, it's just like a regular t-shirt restaurant. And like while you wouldn't dress up even in like business casual for something like the Melting Pot or like Michael's, you would still wear something like slightly nicer than like an anime t-shirt and basketball shorts, right? Like it's just a like you look at the place and you know like, oh, I would want to look a little bit better when I walk in here. Go to Applebee's, you might see Sargon. I would be blessed. We didn't hear much in the way of comments from people who said they were upper class and or rich, but they might be too busy enjoying their tax cuts and sharing Grey Poupon. I don't know if the tax cuts are as much as these people really think it is. But below, here's what Boston.com readers who identify as middle class or below had to say about what it means to be middle class in Massachusetts. Not just financially surviving, but living comfortably. I think you're in the middle classes until you could be independently wealthy enough to live a middle class lifestyle off of investments that takes significant ownership of capital. I was gonna say, if you're able to like live off of your investments and not have to work, I think that would place you outside of the middle class, right? Like, yeah, you're in the middle classes until you can be independently wealthy. But like, I don't know if I would say, I mean, I guess maybe, yeah, he's right. I guess maybe this makes sense. When I like think about it a bit more. Yeah, okay, I agree. I kind of agree with him. I kind of agree. If you're able to afford a middle class lifestyle off of just your investments and not having to work, I'd say you're probably pretty wealthy, yeah. Always shocked by the cost of things I once took for granted. $120,000 in Western Mass used to ensure a family of 4 a comfortable living. Now it's almost lower middle class. It's almost not middle class at all at this point. When times are tough, you go out to eat less. When times are good, you might be able to swing an extra family vacation into the mix. Otherwise, all your middle class money goes to housing, transportation, schooling, food, and heat and electric. Right down the middle. Can you imagine a time when like middle class people were able to take vacations? My dad and grandparents, being working class, like manual laborer people, were able to take me to Disney World when I was in middle school. I could not imagine trying to take a family to Disney World, even on the money that I make right now. Like, that's just an impossibility. Being middle class in Massachusetts means you can afford to pay for all of your basic needs, and as long as you live within your middle class means, you can still have a little extra to put towards savings, or extras at the end of the day. It also means that although you're not living paycheck to paycheck, you still have to keep an eye on your budget, because although you're not lower class, you're certainly not upper class. And you have just a quick drive through an oceanside town like Manchester by the Sea to be reminded of it. I mean, yeah, that's definitely an upper class area, but also, when I think middle class, I think you should be able to take like 1 or 2 vacations with your family in a year. I don't see it as you're able to contribute to your retirement fund, therefore you're middle class. Like, everyone should be able to comfortably contribute to their retirement, right? Like, that should be something everyone is capable of doing. I think class definitions really depends on the income per person within a family. Being a household of 6 consisting of 2 working parents and 4 children, we have an income of $225,000. Sure, by definition within this article, we would be classified as upper middle class, but that doesn't take into consideration the income per family member. By comparison, a dual income household with 2 children making $195,000 is more of an upper class or upper middle class family than our house. North Andover's so fucking expensive. That is, like, no wonder he feels that is an expensive town. The majority of houses that I've seen go on sale in like North Andover and Andover recently have been close to and over $1 million. So like this guy is living in a very expensive area. 4 children, them kids need to work in the mines. Yeah, right? The first step toward once again having a middle class in this country is to stop lying to ourselves about middle class, meaning lots of other people are fewer uncontrollable events away from losing their shirts, so I guess this is fine. I respect the difficulty and complexity of the problem and do not know how to fix it as I type this, but I have the numeracy and moral clarity to see the problem. And I'm privileged to enjoy enough professional standing to feel comfortable naming it out loud. I don't know what he means by this. I don't know what he means by this last sentence, but like, I agree. Like, it is a very complex problem that I don't know personally how to exactly fix because it takes a lot of rotating parts to do. I don't understand about his like privilege, clarity, numeracy kind of thing. Vote differently solved it for you. I mean, yeah, voting differently is the start of it. I believe the hallmark of middle-class lifestyle is debt-free, because almost any adult in America can acquire a big truck or a large home via debt. Keeping up with the Joneses is not the American dream. It is a gateway to bankruptcy and/or foreclosure. I mean, everybody took out mortgages for houses for the most part. It's just that mortgages used to be a reasonable percent of your income instead of like damn near 50%, if not more of it. Right, like we are living on borrowed time as far as all of these FHA loans go. But I don't think you can say that like a Hallmark is debt-free. Because as someone who has been very poor for a long time, like I lived within my means and therefore stayed mostly debt-free until I became unemployed. It was like 3% more than you earned. Now it's like 212% more than you earned. Yeah, it's insane. Money has nothing to do with it. Behavior, etc., is the measure. I don't think you can say that middle class has nothing to do with your income. It's all about your behavior. That's a weird thing to say. Currently, we're paycheck to paycheck. We do not own a home, we rent. We can only afford to take a week-long vacation every other year, and we're on the high end of this income bracket. I can't imagine raising my 3 kids on the lower end. If you're living paycheck to paycheck and you don't own a home, you're throwing your money in a fire from renting, you shouldn't be taking vacations. Like, not to be that bitch, but you should be trying to get out of a rental situation so that you can have a home and a mortgage and build equity. I feel like making the long-term investment into trying to buy a home would be better than taking these week-long vacations. This is like part of a mindset that I think like trips up a lot of people. Is like, yeah, I can understand like wanting things now, but sometimes you have to give things up that you may want now in order to secure a better future and have more access to those things you want later on. They don't make enough to be middle class. I get to pay 40% of my income to state and federal government, said Anonymous. Yo, buddy, I feel your fucking pain. It's shit. Being able to afford a house, have kids, and get pets, I'd say over 70% of my friends ages 30 to 35 make over 200K household income. Yet only 5 to 10% are able to afford a home within an hour commute of Boston. True middle class in the US is gone because it used to mean you could have homeownership without help and be upwardly mobile. That dream died in the 90s. I'm in my 40s, and the majority of people my age and younger cannot afford a home without having one spouse making over 6 figures. Inherited wealth from family, inheriting the home, or being able to live with family so you can take your rent money and save for a home. There's now the homeless, the poor, the working poor, the rich, and the ultra wealthy. Oh, we had that part of her quote from earlier. But yeah, if you aren't making 6 figures, I can't imagine, like, it just feels kind of like almost hopeless, right? Like for the longest time, I was just like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to afford a house. Like I just don't make enough. And like I'm smart enough to save money, thankfully. But it's just like how do you afford things anymore? Being middle class should assume one can afford the luxuries like housing, food, health insurance, and other necessities for your family. As a single widowed parent, I struggle to do that here in Mass. And now on a fixed income, I'm considering leaving as the cost of living is too high and taxes are a great concern. The current cost in Mass is outrageous. Our family that makes over $250K a year doesn't feel middle class. And it's like, I really want that crash to come, man. I really want that crash to come, because this feeling is only going to get worse and worse, and more people are going to feel like they just can't afford to live in general. Trump admin bars illegal migrants and non-permanent residents from receiving taxpayer-backed mortgages. Now my question is, why the fuck were they receiving backed mortgages in the first fucking place? Right, why were they receiving it in the first place? But like, thankfully, they're not able to anymore. The Trump administration will no longer allow illegal migrants to receive FHA mortgages, Housing and Urban Development Secretary Scott Turner announced Wednesday. Today, HUD terminated Biden's taxpayer-backed FHA mortgages for illegal aliens, Turner wrote on X. American taxpayers will no longer subsidize open borders by offering home loans to those who enter our nation illegally. A HUD official informed FHA-approved mortgage lenders on Tuesday that the agency will also no longer consider any non-permanent resident eligible for the government-backed low-income home loans. Again, why was this even a thing? Why was this even a thing? We need more deportations. Currently, non-permanent residents are subject to immigration laws that can affect their ability to remain legally in the country. Deputy Assistant Secretary for Housing, Jeffrey Little, wrote in a letter to mortgagees. This uncertainty poses a challenge for the FHA, as the ability to fulfill long-term financial obligations depends on stable residency and employment. Little noted that it's unclear how many non-permanent residents have received FHA mortgages, but added that going forward, none will. In the past, FHA's residency requirements have required mortgagees to document the borrower's lawful residency status, demonstrating long-term financial stability and eligibility for federal programs. The FHA does not retain citizenship or residency data from the loan application and therefore does not maintain information on the number of non-permanent residents who have received FHA-insured loans under past policies. This update ensures that FHA's mortgage insurance programs are administered in accordance with administration priorities while fulfilling its mission of providing access to homeownership. In 2021, the Biden administration ordered FHA mortgage lenders to allow non-permanent residents enrolled in the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, access to government-backed home loans. HUD's new policy will block DACA recipients, undocumented migrants brought to the U.S. as children, and those with pending asylum claims from access to FHA loans. I don't even remember reading about this. But it's actually insane that this was something that got passed. How was anyone okay with this happening is my biggest fucking question. HUD is prioritizing Americans, not illegal aliens, Turner wrote in a separate X post that POTUS promised to end taxpayer subsidies for illegals. And today we put an end to illegals receiving FHA home loans. The change in policy comes the same week HUD announced that it would work with the Department of Homeland Security to bar illegal migrants from public housing. Also a good fucking change. Slave labor has to live somewhere. HUD cited data from the Center for Immigration Studies showing that about 59% of illegal migrant households benefit from at least one government welfare program, accounting for roughly $42 billion in costs. The agency said that there are at least 9 million residents of public and subsidized housing without proper information sharing to determine eligibility status. That is an insane number. 9 fucking million without proper information. Oh my god, man. I'm glad this is ending. One thing that needs to happen is not just the mass deportation of these people, but also the culling of all of these programs that they have been leeching and taking advantage of. They shouldn't have had access to any of these government funds in the first place, and removing their access to them will ensure less people will even want to come here because there will be no advantage to take. Note for dishonest media journos, the administration put an end to the loans, not the illegals. True and real. This is the right move. The liberal papers will likely have a negative slant. This is not a hateful move. Correct. What were the Republicans doing when this was announced by Biden? Also a good question. He was redirecting money Congress intended to be used for Americans. Why were there not lawsuits like Democrats do every time? Yeah, again, I don't remember this happening. So, I don't know if I missed the news cycle. Maybe I wasn't paying quite as much attention to housing at this point. I don't know. I completely missed this. So I'm wondering why, there was no outrage, or at least not enough that it came across my dashboard naturally. Population of several Scandinavian countries. Yeah, right? You'll admit for a long time, you just assumed the illegals getting government benefits was a meme. You couldn't think of any way it would actually be allowed. Having worked at hotels and knowing people who work at hotels, a lot of when you hear progressives saying illegal migrants pay into the tax system, some of them do, but they're doing it with stolen social security numbers. They're illegal. They don't have identification because they don't belong here. They're getting social security numbers of people who are either dead or buying it from somewhere else, and they're using other people's social security numbers. And when you're a manager at these properties, you can typically find the discrepancies between the people who are working there and the people that they're claiming to be. $330 million in SBA loans went to the dead and infants. Could blockchain have prevented it? Probably not. But let's see about these loans, man. $330 million in small business loans went to kids and the dead, including a 9-month-old, sparking calls for blockchain to prevent future fraud through better transparency and ID checks. Over $330 million worth of Small Business Administration loans were awarded to 115 years old who remained listed as active in the Social Security databases, revealed the Department of Government Efficiency. The most alarming that has garnered public attention is a 9-month-old infant who received a loan of $100,000, according to reports. In an interview with Fox News on March 25th, President Trump said the government calls it a pure fraud. He further clarified, saying, "We would like to use the words waste and abuse." Further, Kelly Loeffler, the 28th U.S. SBA administrator, said on X, the Biden administration enabled and covered up large-scale fraud, waste, and abuse at the SBA.
Well, a clear case of fraud was with the Small Business Administration, where they were handing out loans, $330 million worth of loans to people under the age of 11. I think the youngest, Kelly, was a 9-month-old who got a $100,000 loan. That's a very precocious baby we're talking about here.
Well, we're tackling the fraud, waste, and abuse in the agency. We've seen, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud go unprosecuted, so we're taking that on. We have a zero tolerance policy for fraud, and we continue to crack down on it and make sure people are held accountable.
It's amazing. And you have a lot of that. You found far too much of it. It's a pure fraud. We like to use the words waste and abuse because they sort of sound good, but many of these things are pure fraud.
When I was a baby, I took out a small loan of $1 million. True and real. And I'm sure some of this shit, right? Like, there are a lot of stories of kids who are in, like, the foster agencies getting their social security numbers used by the people who adopt them. My mom tried using my social and my brother's social to apply for, like, loans and shit when we were children. My dad thankfully caught her because he was smart enough to know to do regular credit checks on me, despite me being a child. But my brother, unfortunately, didn't have anyone looking out for him, and so he got slammed with some debt when he turned 18. Unlucky. You could have gotten a legal loan that easy? I guess so. Blockchain could have helped, given that all transactions are traceable and, once recorded, immutable. This feature of blockchain helps prevent the misuse of public funds. For example, if government loans or aid were handled on the blockchain, a system could instantly confirm identities and ensure that only the right people got the money, as it is impossible for a 9-month-old baby to get a $100,000 loan. It also means that the public or auditors could see where every dollar goes, making it less likely that fraud, bribery, or mismanagement will slip by. Blockchain eliminates the role of intermediaries and ensures that money is distributed fairly and transparently, using automated rules, restoring confidence in the management of public resources. However, blockchain is not a cure-all. It is expensive, difficult to implement, and raises privacy concerns. The code is inherently permanent, and thus, a mistake with code is a challenge to fix. This is why transparency, robust human oversight, and regulation are essential to ensure that government funds are spent wisely. And I mean, maybe it could be helpful for, like, government funds, but I don't really know. I've seen so many, like, scams to do with cryptocurrencies that I just, like, inherently have a negative view whenever the blockchain is brought up. And, like, maybe that's, like, a biased negative view simply because of how many scams I've seen with people doing stuff with cryptocurrency. Alright, like, maybe it's just like I don't know enough, so I view it negatively because of the exposure I've had. The blockchain isn't the scam. Like Trump coin. Yeah, like Trump coin. Seeing how shit Bitcoin works, you're very skeptical of blockchain bullshit. Yeah, it's like I'm very willing to admit that it's possible, like, naivety and just ignorance on my part, that I don't know enough, that I have that negative view because of how many scams I've seen. Blockchain is just a tech, it's just a distributing ledger, so any central crypto is a scam? What? Crypto is so good that Bitcoin bros gotta keep hacking YouTube accounts to promote it. True and real. They're getting kind of crafty, man. You'd be surprised if they found some of those in PPP loans too. I would definitely not be surprised. I think there was a whole thing that we read on stream previously with PPP loans as well, like people just making up fake businesses to get the loans because nobody's gonna come with them to pay it back. Blockchain is just a public ledger. It does not have a built-in security. Wouldn't stop the fraud to just leave records. Wells Fargo warns worrying housing market indicator is at a level not seen since the Great Recession. Wells Fargo says home sales have slowed to levels last seen in the aftermath of the Great Recession. Unlike 2008, the broader economy remains strong, home prices aren't crashing, and unemployment isn't soaring. But the housing market is still suffering because potential buyers can't afford the high home prices, along with the high mortgage rates. Meanwhile, sellers won't budge because they can't afford to lose their low mortgage rates. This leads to not a lot of people buying or selling homes at the moment. In January, total home sales reached 4.7 million, a figure Wells Fargo economists say is only modestly above the weak rate experienced between 2008 and 2010. Before the pandemic, monthly home sales averaged around 6 million. Housing demand soared during the pandemic, sending prices and mortgage rates to new highs. But now, high costs and borrowing rates are keeping both buyers and sellers on the sidelines. Homeowners that secured a low mortgage rate during the pandemic or who have paid off their home aren't selling since they do not want to give up low rates. The tepid pace of home sales cannot be blamed on a recession, says the report. Rather, the main factor weighing on residential activity continues to be adverse affordability conditions. In addition to high mortgage rates, home prices continue to rise. Since February 2020, home prices have risen by 45%. On top of that, the average 30-year fixed mortgage rate is 6.67%. In 2020, mortgage rates were just 3%. And removing the ability of illegal migrants to get FHA-backed loans, getting rid of the FHA program that was paying for people's mortgages with taxpayer money, removing all of these unfair ability of people who shouldn't have been in these houses to continue living with them, I think is going to make a massive explosion. I don't know how quickly that is going to happen because, again, I'm not some sort of like crystal ball market managing genius of autism. But considering how many people are going to be having their homes foreclosed on, I can only imagine that it's going to have a decent impact. Need to stop anyone but Americans from buying single-family homes? Yes, we need to prevent corporations from buying single-family properties. The mortgage rate lock-in is the main reason behind the slow rate of sales, since they account for the largest share of total home sales. The pace of the slow sales is expected to remain that way for the next several years. Given affordability will remain extremely unfavorable for most buyers, the pace of home sales is expected to remain weak and not far from low levels hit in the aftermath of the financial crisis, Wells Fargo senior economist Charlie Doherty tells Fortune. Meanwhile, in January, Wall Street issued a chilling warning that U.S. homes are selling for 35% higher than they should be. Real estate analytics firm Green Street Advisors studied the stock performance of two publicly traded companies that own and rent out more than 137,000 single-family homes throughout the country. Investors believe the homes owned by Invitation Homes and American Homes for Rent are overpriced. Publicly traded companies shouldn't be owning 137,000 single-family properties. That is asinine. That is insane. Like that, obviously that's not a large number in the grand scheme of things, but that's still one company out of how many? Investors believe the homes owned by Invitation Homes and American Homes for Rent are overpriced. An average home in the metro areas where Invitation Homes owns property sell for $415,000, according to Green Street's analysis. The share price, which has tanked 10% in the last year, suggests that investors think $310,000 is what the company's homes are actually worth. Overall, in 2024, listing and mortgage prices remained high, and only 24% of home buyers were first-timers in 2024, the lowest on record according to the National Association of Realtors. And there's a lot of people who say that there's a housing shortage. We need to build more homes. There's a housing shortage because there's millions upon millions of people who are in homes that should not be. Not that they don't deserve a home, but they were given mortgages far higher than what they could realistically afford in a home. There's illegals being given loans by taxpayers to get into houses that they shouldn't have access to at all. They're here illegally. When being given a loan, you should be given something that's in your price bracket, but it's not in the lender's best interest to give that to you. Because if they give you something that you realistically can't afford, not only will the FHA pay for that loan, but they're able to tack on those missed payments to your loan and just keep you in perpetual debt slavery that you'll never be able to get out of. There are plenty of new construction homes being built everywhere. They are way overpriced and flimsy, horribly built, horribly constructed, just properties no one realistically wants to live in and are way overpriced for what they are. It's not a problem of needing to build more new houses. It's a problem of needing to fix the system that rigged it towards people getting into houses they can't afford and the government paying the lenders as incentive to keep doing this. Need to stop letting couples use both incomes. I don't even think that's a problem, right? If you have two incomes and you can afford a single family home and you're buying because that's where you want to live, I don't think that's a problem at all. Mass-produced new constructions are criminal ripoffs. You wouldn't download a house! Oh god, the Lawbritarian hot take, thank you for the 100 biddies. Eminent domain all single-family houses from non-citizens and corporations, then sell to citizens, then make it illegal for non-citizens and corporations to ever buy a single-family home ever again. That's an interesting proposal. I'm kind of curious how that would work if it was done. Both incomes inflate prices by 25 to 50%. If you wanted to stop counting dual income for buying homes, I feel like you would have to somehow restrict the workforce to make dual income families less common to begin with. I think that's probably not a good idea. Foreigners should not own houses in the US. Hard agree. Foreigners absolutely should not be able to own land or houses here. Not all places are there illegals in the numbers. Where you live, there are basically none, and there's tons of new housing complexes being built in our area because of the people moving from the north moving there. It's not a total lie, because not every area is the same. I mean, yeah, sure, there could be some areas that do need more new housing properties. When I'm looking at New England, a lot of the new construction properties just languish on the market because they're like 1.2 million at a bare minimum. And if someone's going to pay 1.2 million for a home, it's not going to be a cardboard box that is built with really shoddy construction skills. Make it illegal for women to work. Jesus Christ. There's a way to reduce the number of people in the workforce, but we apparently decided that was a bad idea in the 70s. I think the way we decided that was a bad idea in the 70s was a bad idea. Because it's like women could already work if they wanted to, but now we've been pushed into it's not a choice whether a woman wants to work or not, it's women have to work now. The housewives tried protecting us back then. It's true, but it's more that there's a shit ton of local supply shortages, and local supply is the only supply that matters. When an area gains 200 looking for homes in the same time, they get 50 new homes. It is a problem. I'm sorry, there's too much numbers too fast. I can't do math problems.